Hello and welcome to Overcome a Mental Health Podcast, a safe place for you to tell your stories. I'm very excited for today's guest, Walter Dusseldorp, the Dutch mentor. Russell, or I'm getting your names, but Walter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Travis. Thank you for inviting me on to your podcast and talking about a very important topic.
Yeah, I apologize. I want to read your first name and your last name together.
It's all good.
And today, Walter has some great stuff to talk to us about, and I just want him to have the microphone over to him and let him get started.
Well, thank you, Travis. It's always says, so where should I get started? Well, the answer is usually, at the beginning. So I really was interested in your podcast because, and the topic of mental health, because this is something that is, we all need to be sensitive about. Although I've never been diagnosed, nor do I have something that I say, listen, I am, struggling with my mental health. It is something that in my journey, and I'll tell you my journey in a few minutes, that as I became more self-aware, I came more self-aware about my beginnings and what it was like to be, a child growing up in Holland, and the obstacles that I faced along the way, and how I used resilience in order to overcome some of these obstacles. But even more importantly, how I came across the right people in different phases of my life that helped me understand my why and the reasons behind my attitude early on in life, and how I made adjustments to those in order to live a full, healthy life. And today, as a coach and as a mentor of emerging leaders, I always start at the why, and really get people to take a step back and look at it from not only their reality, but how they are perceived by others. And often we come across some sensitive issues, and mental health is one of those areas that people uh, try to, shortcut or walk away from. While in order to grow as a professional, as an individual, as a father, as a brother, as an uncle, you need to address these things head on and not shy away from them. And as an adult now, just recently, I learned about my own children having some, just struggles with anxiety for a variety of reasons. So I'd be happy to dive into my story if you're ready for that, or if you have a couple of questions before that.
No, go ahead and dive right into your story.
All right. So again, I've written about my story in several book publications. You can find them on Amazon, but and then I use that in the concept of how I became a business leader and how I became a coach and mentor. But it's always a little bit better to kind of put some color to it. So the Dutch mentor is not by accident. I was born and raised in Holland. I came to America when I was 18 years old. But really, to go back to the early part of my life, is that we were typical city kids, growing up in around Delft, Rotterdam, and then moved to a very small farmers town in the eastern side of the country, where all of a sudden we were looked at people who spoke proper Dutch in a community where they had strong dialects, where we did not fit in, and I certainly did not feel that I fit in well. And that was during my formative years, from the ages of first 3-4 years old all the way to 12, 13, before you had to transition into the city. So early on, I had to face difficulties in life, and I had to make choices. And early on, my coping mechanisms was not about effectively communicating with people or understanding what when to walk away from things, but was really talking with my through aggression. And that could be aggression as poking holes into my tire to get attention from my father, to trying to answer questions with my fist, albeit my sisters or people who I went to school with. So, of course, I had no clue what I was doing at that point in time. And it wasn't until later on that I started asking myself the question, why was that? And although I had two very, very loving parents, and both have passed since, my father and mother were children of World War II. They were teenagers during World War II. My father was the youngest of 14 kids, and they literally lost everything. And although my mother was openly able to communicate about her experiences, her traumatic experiences growing up in Utrecht, my father did not. And it really was something that, today I can reflect back upon that and try to walk, a mile in his shoes, but how it was for him to have grown up in World War II, and lost literally everything: his father, his mother, the riches of the family itself. Everybody except for a couple of aunts and uncles who left Holland shortly after the war, moved to America, to Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. So a lot of his, emotional intelligence or was subdued or non-existent, while he was a brilliant engineer, savant-like, but often misunderstood. And my conflict with him, and obviously today I can reflect about it. I'm more like him than not. But because of that, there was a lot of conflict that was created early in childhood, all the way to my 16th, 17th year. That when I loved things, I did great. When I didn't love them, I kind of sidestepped them, and the result of all of that was actually me moving to America when I was 18 years old. And because I wanted to get away from it all, and I wanted to get away from my father, who was a perfectionist, who did not understand me, a mom who was very caring, very loving, and obviously I heard by being the only son and moving to America and being far away. Now we talk about 1988. If you wanted to make a phone call, you had to get 2 rolls of quarters, go to a local, payphone, drop in $7.50 in quarters in order to be able to have an 2-minute conversation with your parents. So I came to a country of the language that I did not speak and culture I was not familiar with, and really was introduced, to my second traumatic experience. Quickly needing to grow up, and living in a house with 20 or 30 other guys from around the world, with all different kind of cultures mixed up, hoping that I was going to come to a camp that I could work at and learn a better way of living. I entered another phase of conflict. And it was really about, the strongest survive. It's about how much you can drink, how much you can smoke, how much weed you can consume. All the things I would try to get away from, and from my poor and bad traumatic experiences in Holland, I fell, into that same trap. And it took me weeks, in order to be able to, months actually, to be able to kind of extricate myself from that and look at the bigger picture. And that was really the first time I met somebody who was going to help me. At least I thought it was going to help me, which of course at that time was a girl. And through that experience with her, instead of learning to deal with my own emotions and learning to understand what life was about, I really learned that that your addiction is often a byproduct of some mental health struggles in growing up. Instead of drinking and smoking, I used sex as another way of overcoming stressors, but all for the wrong reasons. Right? It is, we did it together. It was all consensual, but it was all done for the wrong reason. It wasn't for love. It was truly for lust. And of course, the end result of lust is pain, because that never lasts. So through the struggles of growing up and really never understanding on the why behind it, it wasn't until 1989 I met Father Anthony Moore. He was a priest, a Franciscan priest, who worked at the Family Foundation, where lots of kids from New York City came up to learn to deal with their own struggles around recovery for alcoholism, drugs, and all kinds of other addictions. That was my first really kind of like intervention and mentor, somebody I looked up to, not for religious reasons, but for spiritual reasons and spiritual guidance. Somebody was actually able to have a conversation and understand me. And through that process of learning, and that's when part of the story is that I got married and I couldn't work for the 6 months. I was able to volunteer at a local organization. And during that process, I met Father Anthony Moore and I learned how to live with the 12 steps. And of course, the first, step of the 12-step process is about admitting that your life has become unmanageable. That was really the first time, I went there with the thought process, I'm there to help other kids out and share my story. But really, what I learned a lot about myself is by understanding that all the things I was doing was all to cover up pain that had existed for quite some time. And it is because of that process that I went through, and finally having somebody who was a guiding light, including some of the owners of the facility, Tony, senior and junior, that I was able to see the forest through the trees. And I made a commitment at that point in time that I stopped drinking, I was never really into drugs, but smoked a little weed that I would smoke on the side, but really live a more pure life and really getting on, on a path of recovery. And interesting enough, initially it was, trying to compare myself to somebody else. As they would talk about these drunks and these drug addicts. Well, that's not me. I'm not I'm not homeless. I work hard, made decent money. I was, going through the struggle. But it wasn't until my second mentor, and gentleman by the name of Denny, took me to an AA meeting up in Binghamton, New York, and he said, "Shut up, sit down, relate, don't compare." And I think those are the two most important words I've ever heard in my life. It was that moment when I learned to relate to people rather than compare myself to somebody else that I had a true awakening. And that awakening allowed me to see the world in a different perspective. And that made me understand that there are dry drunks and there are wet drunks. You don't need to consume alcohol or drugs to be an asshole and part of my friends, or live in a way that whatever you do is good for you, not for somebody else. And in that process of learning, I really started the discovery process of self. And interesting enough, inside of me, I had awakened a lion that I always wanted to help people out. Also because of another traumatic experience that I had as a 14-year-old. When I came across an accident in Holland where a farmer died in my hands, I had this helpless feeling that I never wanted to be in a position again that I couldn't help or heal somebody. Although my initial drive was to become a doctor, but that got that got sidetracked because of all the other issues I just talked about. When I came to America, my eyes were opened by, hey, listen, maybe I need to go into emergency service or become a fireman or become an EMT, become a paramedic. I can help other people out, and that's really when I went on that path. And that path, being married and having the 3 kids, all these things really helped form and shape me. But it wasn't again until the next mentor stepped into my life that really helped me open up my eyes, not only in a personal way, but also in a professional manner. And that's really so, the key is to be open to these things and not to be resistant to outside forces to help you see, so to speak, the light. And this was the opportunity to not only be an individual provider of care as a paramedic, but to become a leader of others. And that's where I found the next joy of leadership. Right? You can really have an impact on not only one person, but through other people, you can have an impact on many. And it is through his guidance and his support and his providing the opportunity. But my attitude still was a little bit, listen, if I need to step over your body in order to get where I need to go, I'm willing to do that. But that doesn't get you very far, right? So through that process of getting a deeper understanding of, why I feel, why I think like this, and being able to really mitigate that, to being more outward thinking, be more caring, and really learning about emotional intelligence, being far more important than just having sympathy for somebody, feeling sorry for somebody, rather than feeling for somebody. And in that process, I learn and grow. And that is really what helped me get into a trajectory to what I'm doing today. I'll pause here to see if you have any questions on the first part of that story.
Just good stuff. Like, I really loved the bit where you were talking about uh, relate and don't compare, because I could take that into my personal life quite a bit, because I often find myself struggling with comparing myself to others way too much, and I'm sure the listeners can do the same thing.
It is an interesting point, and I was just working with 2 clients this week about they were getting ready for an interview for significant positions, and they were more worried about their competitors than they were worried about how they were going. They said, "Listen, you can't compare yourself to anybody. You are unique in this aspect. You were offered an opportunity to come for an interview. Now you need to worry about how you present yourself to them and bring all the desirable attributes and the differentiators, because the other things don't really matter. Right? It's beyond your control. The problem is that if I start comparing myself to a negative brain will talk yourself out of every opportunity that's ever presented to you. Right. So that's where the next big lesson I learned in my life is that the brain actually has 2 parts, not only 2 hemispheres, the left and the right side, but it's really made of 2/3 negative brain and 1/3 positive brain. And once you really get that deeper understanding that being happy or being positive is a bit of a struggle because the negative brain is that much stronger. The negative brain loves, these negative events that helps us or that we experience in life. So by learning to promote our positive brain, we can actually have a lot of influence on how we look at the world and how we experience the day. So, part of the readings that I require for all my student and mentees to do is to live, Eckhart Tolle, right? Living in the now, or looking at the positive quotation is another really good way to learning about the brain chemistry and how we are put together, how we function on a day-to-day basis. It is a simple exercise that I recommend is like when you get up in the morning before you swing your feet onto the floor, grab a notepad or your phone and write down or talk, speak into the microphone 5 words of gratitude. So, teach your brain to start the day off the right way. And that is something that, again, a lesson that I learned along the way. And by adopting that and repeating that throughout the day itself, you're more likely to stay on the positive side of the track than the negative. The problem is this: it is like a muscle, right? If we don't exercise this muscle every single day, it will lose tone, right? It will shrink. And before you know it, the negative brain will take over again. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of the negative brain. Now, luckily for me, I have never relapsed. After I made the decision, I don't drink anymore. I don't do any drugs anymore. And I'm on a path of recovery using the 12-step program. I actively used that probably for the first 20 years of my life and never thought about relapse, never wanted to drink because I understood for all the right reasons why I would be better off not doing these things. And I have zero regret of that, right? It is, but I understand today that if you work with other alcoholics or drug addicts or other people who are addicts, it is a struggle. It's a day-to-day struggle for some people, and that therefore often we look at it. There are 3 types of people who enter the room: is those people who come in and stay in, those people who come in once, don't see what they're looking for because they are comparing themselves and leave and have a life of struggle, and then you have people who come and go for the rest of their lives, and often when they don't come back, they have died. And that is something that we need to keep in the back of our mind is that if we look at our day-to-day life, it is a requirement to be able to really appreciate the 5 pillars of our foundation. And the 5 pillars of our foundation is about mental wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, relationship wellness, and financial wellness. It is those 5 pillars that are in a constant state of motion. And it requires us to take, to take care of them. And if we ignore any one of them, we can be in trouble. But to guarantee you, we ignore 2 out of the 5. Well, listen, how long can you sit on a stable stool with 3 legs on it? Not very long, right? So you can be financially secure, you can be physically in great shape, you can even have a good relationship, but if you're mentally and spiritually a basket case, it too will, the rest of it will also fall apart. So the sooner we can recognize that it is not, what we see that matters, but it is what we feel that matters. And that's really where, I've learned over time. And listen, I can tell you another 5 things have happened in my life from severe spinal injuries and 9 surgeries to losing the feeling in my feet to all kinds of divorces, all of these things. I survived them all and I thrived through them because I always led with a positive mind. I reminded myself that there's always somebody else who's worse off than I am. And I surrounded myself with people who were able to help me, not with people who wanted to commiserate in my misery. And that's another message that is critically important, that you have to surround yourself with the right people. And it was in 2012, I met, my mentor for life, Mark, who really helped me from both a personal and professional way of setting myself up for success. And without a single question, it has helped me become the leader I am today, the coach and mentor I am today. It has made me a better husband, a better father, a better uncle. And I'm tremendously grateful for all of these people that came into my life of course, I'm grateful that had the ability to be able to open my mind and experience their insights, even though they came from vastly different walks of life. He was Mormon. I have another mentor, Mike, who's a Southern Baptist Christian. I had a Catholic, priest. So it is really how we need to open up our own minds and our own hearts to people who might be able to share things with you that allow you to really work on those 5 pillars and set yourself up for success.
Yeah. And have you personally ever struggled with one of those 5 pillars?
Yes, I think I struggle with all of them at some point in time. Now, I will say that I've been very, very lucky that I have never experienced depression, or to mental health crisis. But I will say that I have experienced 2 short periods that, as I went to a divorce, before I went to a divorce, once I found out that things were not going well in my marriage and things happened that should not have happened in a marriage, I actually had a couple of panic attacks. So those were somewhat quasi mental and mental, physical, attacks that now, I was lucky enough that I knew somebody who has experienced them, was able to pick up the phone and have conversation and talk my way through it. Of course, as a paramedic, I've treated many people in mental health crises. So I can relate to that, although I had a little taste of it. I know, because of that, which ended up leading to making a decision for my own mental health, that I needed to go to a divorce, that allowed me to take steps to recovery. And those steps to recovery, again, that's another area that men tend to be more weak about them and women, is that I had to admit that I could not do this alone. And I had to go see a counselor for a period of time to help me through this difficult period of time, to ask tough questions, to hold myself accountable, to be in a safe space, to talk about, deeply vulnerable issues. And that is something that I highly promote, even in my mentorship of today. When I come across people who have issues with relationships or with children, I strongly encourage people to go to the appropriate mental health expert in order to seek that help, in order to be able to learn to manage those feelings before they can even expect to continue to grow as
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree with you there. I had no idea, like, when I was going through my mental health stuff myself, there was a time where I didn't really believe in therapy. Like, I was like, this isn't for me. How can I fully open up to somebody? And when I did it and actually learned different techniques to get me through the day, I was like, oh, this is amazing. So I highly recommend it for anybody who's struggling.
Yeah, I think the message that we need to give to people is this, right? Is that the first, second, third, or fourth therapist might not be right for you, and that's okay. But don't stop looking for the person that works that helps you through your crisis. Right? It's no different than, listen, if somebody is put on blood pressure medication, often it takes 2 or 3 medication adjustments to get the right one. If you happen to be depressed and you need to go on to a medication, often it's not the first medication you take is going to be the right one. So again, the message is, don't give up because the first experience wasn't exactly what you expected to be, right? Keep trying until you find the right person that you can relate to, right? That can relate to you, that you find you have a certain level of chemistry with it. Of course, at the
Yeah.
same token, don't search until you find the perfect person, because that's not out there either. Right. But it is, being with a therapist it allows you to become vulnerable. Right. It is no different than I teach in my leadership class, is that the best leaders out there know when to be vulnerable, to talk about their journeys and their experiences and their pitfalls. And that's all good, not bad.
So thinking to the audience and stuff, like, what's a good way for them to actually learn how to balance the 5 pillars in their own life?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So the first thing I would suggest people to do is to write down the 5 pillars. So literally write down on a piece of paper, mental health, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, relational wellness, and financial wellness, and make an assessment on a scale 1 to 10 on how well you are dealing with each one of those pillars. And let's say if it is your spiritual is at a 4, while your financial relationship and all of them are 7 and 8, well, then you need to work on your spiritual wellness and really go on a discovery process and say, listen, why is this not? Why am I not fulfilled? What is missing here? But you have to ask these tough questions of yourself, and then, of course, try to find answers through reading articles, through meeting with other people, sometimes through therapy. But it is by writing these things down and to assess on a scale of 1 to 10 on how well you're doing. And if you find a deficiency in any one of them, then put a countermeasure into place. Take an action. And the thing is, you cannot just talk about an action. You have to actually measure your action. And those people who learn to adopt a measurement and scorecard will find recovery much quicker. And I'll usually give a simple example, is that often people feel down on themselves because they're not physically fit, right? We all tend to struggle. And I'll use myself as an example, right? Is that I would love to go to the gym 3 times a week and work out for 20 to 30 minutes. But listen, I've had a lot of obstacles face me. My neck is fused. My lower back is fused. I can't feel my right foot and my left toes. I have all these injuries. Well, I can come up with 100 excuses why never going to the gym. But that doesn't make me healthier, right? So instead of using excuses, I need to take accountability. And so the first action I need to take is to say, on paper, physical, I score myself at a 4, and my desire is to be at an 8. And the action I'm going to take is going to the gym or a home gym and exercise 3 times a week for 15 minutes. But you say, oh, Walter said that, CDC recommends 3 times a week for 30 minutes. Well, start with something that's realistic. It's more realistic. I will do 3 times a week for 15 minutes. And once I do that well, I can always increase to 20, 25, 30 minutes, right? But the key thing is to document it. So on my calendar today, I have 3 appointments on my calendar. So it's a reminder, a visual reminder that I made a deal with myself on Monday, Wednesday, Friday to exercise. And on my scorecard, I need to write down a red, yellow, or green. Did I exercise? If I didn't do it, it's a red. If I kind of sort of did it, it's a yellow. If I did it well, it was a green. And I need to make a promise to myself when I see more yellows and reds, I need to ask myself, why is that? And take a countermeasure to it. And again, these are the natural weaknesses of people. We love to make excuses. Well, it was too cold, too wet. I didn't feel like I had a cough. My neck hurt. My back hurts. A meeting came up. But none of that is going to help you strengthen that pillar of physical health. Right? So, but if you don't write it and if you don't score it, hey, listen, you'll go down that continuous spiral of not doing the things you know are good for you. Right? So again, a scorecard by writing down what it is that you're going to do. And that could be, listen, I need to drink more water. Well, maybe you say, listen, I'm going to drink 6 glasses. So every day you should measure, did I have 6 glasses of water today? I want to pray, or I want to go to meetings, or I want to do this. Write it down. You're more likely to follow through on it. Because your brain has a truth center to it. Right? In our brains, we have a little man or woman or whatever you want to call it, that when you say yes, but it's really no, that little voice in your head will say, dude, you just lied. That's squarely a no, right? And that's what we need to learn to listen to and to be able to follow that voice, follow that guidance of truth, because otherwise we're just doing ourselves a great disfavor by not reaching our goals and lying to ourselves.
Good stuff. I love it. What's like with all the setbacks that you have faced in your life? Like, that's one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from those.
Well, I think 2 things is a reminder that there's always somebody is worse off than you are. So, for example, in June of last year, I was traveling and I always couldn't feel my fingertips. Now, I already had back surgery 12 months before that was debilitating and very difficult for me to overcome. I had multiple surgeries. The first one didn't go well. I had to get a second one correction. Then it became septic. I went through this whirlwind of all kinds of emotions because of that. Finally on a path of recovery, and I was going to have why can't I feel my fingers? And long story short, once I recognized that something was wrong and I got care, I almost became a quadriplegic, and almost in a way that I was on the operating table and I lost feelings below my neck twice for 20 minutes. And thank God, through the golden hands of a surgeon, they were able to fix me and fuse my neck, and all of the symptoms have resolved. But you think that is hard? Well, I get a follow-up report saying, "Hey, listen, everything looks good, but by the way, there's a little spot on your throat. You should get checked out." First as a guy, what could it be? They always find something is benign. But my doctor kept reminding me, said, "Listen, you better go back and get something checked out." They said it could be something that's growing in your neck. I said, "Okay." So I get an ultrasound done. Of course, 3 days later, I find out I have an golf ball sized tumor in my neck that is sitting over my parathyroid gland, which now I have to get a biopsy. And the biopsy now shows it's inconclusive. It could be cancerous. So now I get to schedule myself for another surgery, which I had on January 6th. I went, had it, had it removed out of my throat. And then you have to wait another 7 days to find out if it was cancerous or not cancerous. Now, knock on wood, it was non cancerous. 14 days later, because they were able to remove half and leave the other half, I'm saying, listen, I don't need to take medication. My thyroid stops working. Now I have to take synthroid replacement therapy anyhow. So all of these things it's like somebody beating you down. It's like, how many times can I get beat up in order to, the key to it is that always remember there's somebody else who's worse off than you. Try to use a positive and a growth mindset. Listen, I can overcome this. I am resilient. This is just a bump in the road. There's better things ahead of me, right? Is that I can overcome. So all of these setbacks have cost me, friends have cost me, money has cost me, business has cost me. But the thing is that none of that matters because it's all yesterday. I can't live in yesterday. What we did 5 minutes ago is done. I can never get that time back. I can never change what was said. So learning to really live in the now, with, of course, a little forward looking into the future, is something that is really, really important. And then I would recommend every single person to write a Mark Twain quote in very large letters somewhere in the house if you're struggling with this. 92% of the things we worry about never happen. But that 92% of the things you worry about, if you allow yourself to worry about, it robs you of quality of life. So we really have to remember that we cannot be held back by the things that could potentially happen or the what ifs. But sometimes we have to face consequences. That's at 8%, and we just need to learn to overcome. But if we are stuck in worrying about what everybody else thinks of you, I mean, all the things that are happening, you can't live a full life. And the lesson that I learned out of this is this, Travis, that what is one thing we know 100% sure that will be true in 125 years from now?
One thing, I honestly, coming from me, I'm a religious person, so I'd say God exists.
In 125 years from now, we are all dead.
That's true.
Except for maybe a couple of turtles.
Yeah.
I guarantee that we are all dead. Mm-hmm. At best, we're going to be remembered with a picture on the wall, and that's unlikely in our digital age. You might be a picture inside of somebody's computer.
Inside of somebody's computer that's not working anymore.
as a distant memory. So think about all the things that you worried about, on how you're going to say it, or what you're going to do, or what job you want to have, or all that stuff. On the end of the day, it does not matter at all.
It doesn't make sense to worry about. Yeah.
But we do this all day long. So we need to learn to worry less and to live our lives to a fuller extent. And that is something that is really, really important, to live on going forward. Now, one of my mentors, Mike Versina, and I'll mention his name because he wrote a great book called, Leading with Your Upper Brain. It's available on Amazon. I highly recommend anybody out there to go pick a copy up because it's very, very important. So one of the things in both leadership and life, we have to understand that our brain, like I said, is positive and negative, but also has an upper level and a lower level to it. We tend to be very reactive to the things that happen around us. That's what we call lower brain thinking. Those are not the best thought centers. These are fight for flight. Something happens, we react to it, and often the outcomes, because we react to something, is really not as good as if we only had taken a sliver of time to process the information, put it into perspective, and then to properly respond, which is what we call an upper brain action. And that is really something that you need to take to heart as well. So that helps you overcome mental wellness and spiritual wellness and physical wellness, relational wellness, financial wellness. So again, I would highly recommend anybody listening to this, write down 3 letters and keep them in a prominent location. E times R equals O. And always think about it. Events are going to happen in your life. There's nothing you can do about it. People are going to die. People are going to be born. You're going to have accidents. You're going to have success. You're going to have failures. Not much you can do about that. There will be outcomes of those events. But in order to get the outcomes of those events to be more favorable to you, we need to learn to respond to them rather than to react to them. Our tendency is to react, and the outcomes are less than desirable. Learning to slow things down and to process these things through responding to that, we will have a better grasp on the outcome. So, and that goes right back to those 5 pillars, right? If one of your pillars is crumbling and you're reacting to that, whatever the decisions you come up with at that part of time, they are often cost more or less effective. But if you would only take the time to take a bit of self-inventory and to try to understand the why behind you're not feeling well, or you're not doing well, or financially, mentally, physically, it doesn't make a difference. You are more likely to seek the help that's available to you through counsel, through therapy, through a financial advisor, and recover from that quicker than if you try to do it all on your own. So E plus R equals O is a very powerful equation that we should keep in mind through all phases of life.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you brought that up about reacting, and how as people we tend to react over everything. And I spent a whole therapy session with my therapist talking about and walking me through how to overcome that and actually take a step back and take a breath and be like, you know what, like, how am I going to react to this? Does it make sense the way I'm about ready to do it, or is it even worth it?
Yeah. Yeah, listen, having worked in emergency services all of my life, sadly, too many of my friends have committed suicide. There's a physical difference between a man and a woman committing suicide. Often men are very reactive. It's a spur of the moment. They grab a gun, shoot themselves, cut themselves, do whatever. And it is often detrimental. Women tend to be more, not that they're more thoughtful, but they tend to think more, right? They respond to things more, and they do things not to the point of actually ending their lives, but more likely to ask for help, right? Even if it's not asking for help in the right way. But so one of the things that, and again, I cannot personally relate to, I've never thought of suicide in any which way, form or manner for myself, but having been exposed to it so many times as a care provider, responding to people who committed suicide, or successfully or unsuccessfully, or certainly see, people in my close family and friend network, it is a real thing, right? And again, it is our role as leaders, our role as partners, as husbands and brothers and sisters. Often people are reacting out in a visual way on Facebook or Instagram by posting things that we need to be more in tune by. Well, again, most of us are so absorbed in our own BS that we are not really in tune with what others are asking us or telling us, that until after something has happened, we go back to their page and say, oh my God, the person was screaming out for help for the last week or 2 weeks, and we ignored it. Now, I still say that suicide is one of the most selfless acts in the world. I think it is, it should not. it should not be celebrated in any which way, form, or shape. I think it is very detrimental for the people who are left behind, and exceptionally selfish for the person who does that. But it is our role as leaders to care deeper for the people that we lead, right, in our businesses, or that the people that we care for in our own communities. So we need to be more in tune what is taking place, which is preventative, not reactive.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to something you said before. And this I want to speak for just a second on those people that are feeling those suicidal tendencies. And you mentioned something about surrounding yourself with the right people. And I've personally struggled with suicidal thoughts quite a bit, like throughout the years. But once I figured out that I could surround myself with the right people, I know who to reach out to during those times that are really dark for me, so I can get a helping hand.
Hey, listen, Alcoholics Anonymous has they will tell you that it is people, places, and things that will ruin your life, but can also save you. Right? If you're an alcoholic or drug addict or sex addict or somebody who's depressed, don't go hang out where you are commiserating with other people in the same circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Surround yourself with people who can lift you up, who can listen to you, who can help you see the light, who can help you overcome. Right? But people, places, and things are critically important in all phases of recovery.
Yeah, I agree. That this I want to go back to being resilient and to somebody who's just trying to learn that concept of resilience and trying to be more resilient themselves. Like what advice do you have for them? Like how do they even start to develop that mindset?
Yeah, so I think resilient is an EQ, right? An emotional intelligence attribute. So the first thing we need to recognize is that an EQ is like a muscle. This is not something I can pick up a book and read once and be really good at for the rest of my life and call myself resilient. This is something that needs to be exercised continuously. So resilient just means to me that it is not that I'm ignoring my feelings, but I'm willing to do the work to help me overcome those feelings and to get past those feelings, right? And if you surround yourself with the right people in the right place and the right things, you're more likely to recover from those. So again, if you only do it in the time of crisis, that's probably not the best time to practice these things. Right? So it's best done when you are feeling well and learning how to grow this muscle and understand, in other words, understand where the resources are that you need during your moment of crisis that will help you recover from it quicker. And resilient is about getting through the tough, the lows, and then learn to thrive again. And it's not about denying that you have gone through a low. It's not even about being ignorant that there will be a low in front of you sometime. But it is utilizing the resources that are available to you to be able to get through these moments. And we call these valleys of despair, right? In business, and we and there's something that lots of people have experienced. Many leaders are not very happy leading. And they said, so why is that? They said, you were a wonderful, high-performing frontline performer, and we promoted you into supervisor, manager, director level role, but how come you're not thriving? Well, listen, those people go to a valley of despair. They go from doing things to now being leading, but they don't know how to do these things, right? It is only through becoming vulnerable, admitting that I'm not capable, right, and seeking help, assistance, that you can then apply certain practices that can build resiliency that allows you to learn to thrive in a new circumstance. Now, none of these things, these are all habits and behaviors that need to be changed. Well, I got news for you. I don't care if you read a book or go to a conference, your habits and behaviors are not changing overnight. That takes 90 to 120 days of repetitive action in order for you to to create a new normal. And that is, again, our human nature is and our attention span is so short that if I can't get what I want within 9 days, I'm not doing it again. And you say, Walter, what are you talking about? Well, I'll give you a prime example. Right? We make all these promises to ourselves on December 31st, the new year starting. And one of those is what? We all go to the gym and say, this year is the year that I'm going to work out 3 days a week, 30 minutes. I'm going to build muscle. I'm going to be healthy living. Well, you go out and buy a membership for the year. The guy who owns the gym loves you. And then you go to the gym 3 times the first week, 2 times the second week, 1 time the third week, and then you go back sporadic for the rest of the year. But the guy who owns the gym loves you because he got you on the hook. Of course, the bodybuilders love you because now by February, you're leaving them alone and they have all the access to all of the equipment again. So people actually rely on your inability to have a behavior that is sustainable in order to be able to make money. Right? So the sooner we recognize that if you want to establish new normals, you're required to do something on a daily basis for an extended period of time. And I'll give you a simple exercise to do. If I asked you to write your first name and last name with your dominant hand, what does that feel like, Travis? Do it right now. What does that feel like? Tell me your feelings as you write it.
Writing my first and last name, it just feels natural. Like it's easy to do. Like
you don't even have to think about it, right?
I don't have to think about it. It's just second nature.
Does it look the same?
Yeah, for the most part.
All right, now put the pencil into your non-dominant hand and tell me what that feels like.
I could do it, but it's definitely a lot harder. My handwriting's pretty sloppy. I actually have to think about it more. I'm actually surprisingly doing a little bit better than I expected.
Okay. So if I say, Travis, from this point forward, you are never allowed to write with your dominant hand again, only with your non-dominant hand. And you say, okay, Walter, I agree with that. I'll accept that. When I walk away, what is the human nature? What are you going to do?
Human nature would just be going right back to my dominant hand.
Okay.
Without thinking, yeah.
And we do this all of the time as bosses. Yeah. We walk away, and then only until something falls apart, I go back and say, hey, Travis, are you writing with your non-dominant? No. Well, that's on me, right? So in order to change, do you think you can become ambidextrous? That you can learn to write perfectly with both hands?
I personally think I could. If I put...
How long do you think it would take you to do that?
It would probably take me at least a few months, if not more, just because I'd have to... Every time I wrote with my non-dominant hand, I'd have to sit and think about it. And it would take me longer to write.
So the goal would be about 15 minutes a day for the next 90 to 120 days to become ambidextrous. If you would not hold yourself to that challenge and measure your success on a daily basis, what's the likelihood that you'll make it to a new normal, that you will become ambidextrous?
Very slim to none if I don't hold myself accountable.
Exactly. And because it's not a burning platform, there's no money against it. It's just so again, the sooner we recognize how difficult it is to adopt new behaviors, that if we are truly serious about it, that we need to establish what we call a burning platform, right? And this is where financial wellness comes into place, right? Is that many people have credit card bills that are far exceed their abilities to pay. And it's like this spiral, that's out of control. Because you never can pay off a credit card once you start it, unless you have, unless you make enough to be able to pay off the principal and the interest itself. So a lot of people need to be put on a path of recovery. Well, you have to take drastic actions, and often needs to be measured on a daily basis in order to be able to get to that point that you can actually get control of your finances, right? It is very, very difficult to do. It's not that it can't be done. It is just very difficult to do. But and often you cannot do it alone. You have to get what we call an accountability partner. So a bunch of my clients, although I have great conversations with them, but the primary driver that my clients is because they need somebody to hold them accountable. And because they pay me, they would take it a lot more serious than if I would volunteer my time, because then they will skip week after week after week. Right? So that really is no different than a therapist, right? And somebody who's a friend who gives you good advice. The friend who gives you good advice, you only go to on an as-needed basis. But if you have to pay somebody, you'll be there. Right? And you actually take the advice more serious too.
And then speaking of like the it, we're kind of the subject of developing habits there for a second. I actually recently spoke to a guy that he works in neurology, and he said that the brain is a creature of habit, and if we don't train it and rewire it, we're just going to go back to what the brain knows, and that kind of falls all into this, like, you know, how we're basically there's 2/3 of our brain's negative part, so we have to train it to be positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is very difficult to do. Right. So when I work my clients, I have a 9 dot exercise. I can't do it here because we don't have a blackboard to play on, but it is, I encourage people of, well, you give 9 dots, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? It just looks like a box itself. And the exercise is to connect all of the dots with 4 straight lines, but you cannot go over any one dot more than once. And people can do it, right? They have come up with all kinds of things. And the people who do it, they usually cheat by going to Google and look for an answer here. And the reason why that is because our brain is wired to stay within the box, right? If we see a problem that's like in a key lock, we go get the key that we know has opened that lock before. That's our natural, normal behavior. So that's why addiction is so difficult, because we tend to, if we don't, establish new habits and behaviors, we have the tendency to fall right back to the people, places, and things that are normal to us, right? So learning to think, to learning to become resilient, learning to adopt a growth mindset, a positive mindset, all these things require daily work. Now, you will be more successful if you measure your daily activities and hold yourself accountable to that. And it's even more important that you get an accountability partner who can help you be accountable. And if you are not, if you have yellows and reds, then there needs to be a consequence, and you need to hold yourself to that consequence. That could be, donating money to no more Starbucks for you. But there needs to be some meaningfulness behind it. Otherwise, we are creatures of habit. Our brain is. We'll go right back to what we know best, which is not always best for us.
Yeah, that's totally for sure. And like you said, it takes a lot of work. I've had to. I'm tend to be a very anxious person, and I was in some pretty intense therapy there for a while. Uh, Basically training my brain, helping to train my brain and learn techniques to stop me being from being so anxious and
Mm-hmm.
overreacting. And I would be lying if I said, "Oh, this is so easy." No, I have to sit there and think about things and be intentional, like on how I'm reacting, so I don't overreact.
Listen, anxiety is an undervalued feeling that many people suffer from. And I think that our society of being connected via computers rather than in real life is not helping matter.
Not
Uh,
at all.
uh, and having this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, stimulation to our telephones is not helping matters. Shying away from spiritual or religion is not helping us. Again, there's a reason why we have a mental health crisis in this country, right? Because it is all for the obvious that, the family values that we talk about, um, uh, you know, and having some level of spirituality. You don't even have to be religious, for that matter. Is something that we need to go back to, right? And I think that we're going through a bit of a transformation in the country today, that people are starting to see, at least a segment of the population is starting to see that there's value to these things. But it also causes a tremendous amount of anxiety on the flip side.
Yeah.
Anxious over things that will never happen. Mark Twain, 92% of the things you worry about never happen. But
Yeah,
I
and
can
I
tell
always
you that. But if you don't believe that, it makes no difference.
you talk about the spirituality and how it needs to come back and how we're missing some of it. I always tell people one of the things that I like to say is like we need to build a foundation and build a foundation. For me, I built that foundation upon God, and somebody else might be just like a higher power. Like I just say someone higher than yourself. Like it doesn't matter who or what you believe in, but it helps stabilize you.
Yeah. It is, and then and the key is to not judge you or
Mhm.
me for what I believe in. Right? I'm
Exactly.
supportive to whatever you believe in. You're supportive of whatever I believe in. If it gives me peace, if it gives me tranquility, it gives me makes me resilient. Hey, I'm all for it. Right? It is, and it is not. Again, it goes right back to the saying that I gave you first: is that we need to learn to relate to each other, not compare to each other. Right? It's part of the reason when I teach leaders, have conversations with your team members and talk about the things that you love. Right? What are the 6 values you hold true? We might be from all different parts of the world, but often out of 6 values, 3 of them we share. Spirituality, family, love of animals, maybe a sport. We can relate to these things. And that's where we need to start building true relationships and partnerships on, because that, on the end of the day, is going to help us.
I full on agree. Well, is there anything that we have not talked about that you would like to talk about?
No, so the only thing I would say is a parting word. Parting words is that we are all leaders. I don't care if you're a leader of one or if you're a leader of many. We should not shy away from really having a much deeper understanding of self. I always encourage people to go online and go to look up a TED talk that labeled or titled "Starting with Your Why." It really, we have such a tendency to talk about our what and how that we don't take enough time to really understand what makes us tick. And why is that important? Well, 68% of the workforce today is at or near burnout. 72%, oh, sorry, I think it is like 22% of the people actually love what they do. That's scary. You're going to be spend more time away from your family at work. And why only 22% of you really love what you do? So you owe it to yourself, because you only get one life to live, is to really understand your why. What is it that you can do or want to do? So I'll leave you with what I call the 4 Ps. And if you're fortunate enough to collect connect the 4 Ps, you will live a better life, a better balanced life. So it's always about finding your purpose and passion in your heart. If you can connect your true purpose and passion with people and processes where you can have a meaningful outcome, you will find joy in your life again. And the sad truth is that most of us are not are not connected to our true purpose and passion, because we don't even know what that is. No, it has never taken the time to raise self-awareness to the point of really understanding what is my true purpose and passion. What is my true differentiating superpower? So I would encourage people always go onto that journey first. Anybody that is interested, you can go to my website at thedutchmentor.com. I work with leaders across all industries. This is something you should do for yourself. This is something should do for the people that you lead. Book a free consultation. We can have a chat about your life, your experiences, and see how we can have a positive impact on you and your team. And if there's an opportunity to collaborate and buy into some of the programs that I offer, that is great. If not, we will have a nice conversation. Hopefully, we take away a couple of things that will better our lives and the way we lead or the way we live life ourselves.
Perfect. And other than your website, do you have any social media that you'd like to guide people to?
Yeah. You can find lots of clips on YouTube and on Instagram at the Dutch Mentor. You can go to Amazon. I've I think published like 9 or 10 books that you can pick them up. All of them are like $10 or less. All of them will add value to your life in different phases of your life, either personal or professional. There's even a little children's book that I strongly encourage people to buy and utilize for their kids, where they have an opportunity to write about their feelings on a daily basis. And this is not about writing words. This can be just using colors and pictures. But it is exceptionally important that as parents, as people, that we start talking about feelings much sooner in life and normalize these things. The sooner you get to really understand your feelings and help them understand what how to work with those things, with those with anxiety or happiness or anything in between. I think the more prosperous, the better lives they will live.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Walter, for being on the show. I admire you and your positive mindset. Uh, Thank you all to those who listened. And you can find us at Overcome Pod on Instagram and YouTube. The best thing you can do for us right now is share, like, follow, subscribe, do all of the above. And especially the sharing part. Like, if you feel like what you're hearing, please share it with a friend. But thanks again for listening. Until next time.